Hey there, and thanks for joining us today on Hay Talk by Massey Ferguson. My name is Matt LeCroy with Massey Ferguson and Heston by Massey Ferguson.
And I'm Jessica Williamson, livestock and forage manager with AGCO. We're here to help you get the best hay possible, and this season on Hay Talk, we're diving even deeper, looking into how you can maximize your output, get the most from your equipment, and more.
Today we're going to continue our chat that we started in episode 1 of Round Bale Silage. We're doing, digging deep into everything around Bale Silage, and we're going even more in depth today to look at forage quality, labor savings. We talked about the Massey Ferguson Silage Round Bale, the RB series last episode. This episode we're going to look at the ProTech, which is a baler wrapper combo, as well as some efficiencies and quality of life changes that you can make happen on your operation, right? So stick with us after the break, and we'll get into more depth with silage round baling.
So, Matt, tell us a little bit about the ProTech Baylor. I know that you gave us a rundown of the RB series that we have in the last episode, but tell us a little bit about the ProTech Baylor and the differences.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So our ProTech baler, as we call it, it is a baler wrapper combo, and it was purpose built. So we did not just take the RB series and drop it onto a frame. It's all made in-house. The frame and chassis is all purpose built to be a silage wrapper combination. So the front chamber and everything is very similar. Comes down the same line with our RB series, so it's very heavy. It's robust, has all the bells and whistles and features that you're used to with the RB series, but it also has the wrapper on the back. And the really cool thing is it's all isobus controlled. So once you set it up, the process takes care of itself when you're going through the field. So it makes the round bale. It will put net wrap on the round bale to hold it together. Obviously, don't use as much because it's not going to be having to be stored out in the field, obviously. So it moves from the chamber over to the wrapping table. The chamber closes. You can continue baling, making your next bale as that wrapping station takes care of itself. Some really neat features on the wrapping station is it's got a side hill mode. So if you're on a little bit of a side hill and you've got that transition from the bale coming from the chamber back to the wrapping station, there's less chance of it falling off. Because sometimes if you're on the side of a hill, there's an opportunity there. So it does have a tilting mechanism that kind of negates that problem. And really cool thing about the wrapping station is how fast it works. It's usually about 38 seconds at the most to wrap the bale properly. You have different options in there that you can change it depending on how much stretch you want to get in that plastic film. And you can use different film sizes too. So when you go out to your local AGCO dealer, you'll see different film sizes, and you make sure you get the right one for your operation, and also get your local Massey Ferguson dealer to set you up with how much stretch you need to put on that film as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the last episode, we talked a little bit about wrapping the bales and in that ideal moisture range. One thing that I should have said then, but I'll say it now. Previous research has shown us that we need at least a 6 mil thickness on the external portion of that bale to exclude oxygen if we're within that ideal moisture range. So we talked a little bit last time that ideally we would like to have that bale in that 45 to 60% moisture range. So if we're within that range, we want at least a 6 mil thickness of film on the outside of that bale. So if we're using a 1 mil thick plastic, then we want at least 6 wraps. If we're at 1.5 mil thickness, then we can reduce it down to 4 wraps. Either way, making sure that we at least have a minimum of that 6 mil thickness. 8 would be even better. We can make sure that we're excluding that oxygen as best as possible. And our ProTech Baylor will do that for you.
Yeah, some people that are new to hay in a day, silage baling and stuff might have a little sticker shock when they first look at that. But the way I see it is, pay me now or pay me later type thing. So how much loss are you going to have by not doing the proper steps to get to your end result, right?
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
Yes, that's one thing I want to talk about today. I just mentioned is hay in a day, right? So forage quality, hay in a day. What's that look like? What do um, the farmers out there that are listening, what do they need to be looking for if they're new to this operation?
So, in order to optimize or to ensure that we're getting that hay in a day, first and foremost, if we track all the way back to our episode 1 that we talked about, we're going to make sure that we have as wide of a swath as possible. That's going to help us to make sure that we can get that crop dried down to the ideal moisture, that 45 to 60% range, if we're talking about round bale silage, as quickly as possible. So if we're going to dry it down from an 80% moisture to a 55% moisture in a day, we need to make sure that we are potentially conditioning. If we have a conditioner available, or especially if we're in a legume crop that has a little bit larger of a stem circumference than what some of our grasses might have. And we want to make sure that we lay that swath wide and flat so that we can allow that solar energy to dry down that crop as quickly as possible. Oftentimes, at least in my neck of the woods, so I live in southern Pennsylvania, it's necessary to ted that crop at least once throughout the day if we're going to get that dry down that we need in order to bale it within that same day. Definitely not necessary at all times of the year, and especially not necessary in all geographic locations, because I know a lot of places in the world have a lot less humidity and a lot more solar power than we do up here in the Northeast. But if that's really our goal, is to bale that crop within daylight to daylight period, we need to make sure that we're getting that ideal moisture as quickly as possible.
So that's another thing, looking at like hay in a day type thing as well. You could also look at over a 24-hour period instead of just, cutting today and cutting tomorrow. So what I like to do sometimes is cut around that 2 to 4 o'clock range, depending on how much crop you have to cut, obviously, and then bale around that same time the next day, right before the dew starts kicking in, right? If so, at that point, you're catching a lot more sugar because of the time of cut, and then you're capturing it right before that dew hits in. So that's another way to look at it. And, that's awesome. So another thing to look at and think about, we're talking silage. Let's talk about length of cut, right? So sizing your crop properly, and what that looks like, but for the end results for your cattle, for feeding, for does it affect dry down at all? So can you talk to us about that?
Sure. So, well, first of all, Matt, why don't you tell us about the knife options that are available within the ProTech Baylor, and then I can talk to you a little bit about what's going to happen within that rumen with the length of cut of the silage.
Yeah. So if you don't run any of the knives, obviously you do no chopping, you're not sizing the crop at all. If you run either knife bank independently, so 8 knives or 9 knives, you're going to probably be looking at a 4.5, 5.5 inch cut, somewhere in there, maybe up to 6 inches, depending on how much crop material you're putting through there. If you run all 17 knives, you're going to get somewhere around the 2.6 to 3.5 inch size in there. And one thing to take in consideration, because I know what you're going to say, that's where we want to be, and that's a better option for feeding. But keep in mind, you're going to dull your knives faster when you do that. You're going to burn more fuel, and you could be baling a little bit slower, putting drag on your tractor, because it does, when you engage all 17 of those knives, it's going to put more drag on your tractor. So yes, you can use that baler at 130 with a 130 horsepower tractor, but when you start engaging those knives, you need to jump up to 150, 160, maybe even 175 if you're in some hills in Pennsylvania, maybe. So yeah. So how does that work out?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. So it's really important that you're analyzing the type of crop that you're in, just like you just said, but also the stage of maturity. So typically, if we have a much more mature crop, Like, say, if we're in first cutting orchard grass, for example, and say that it's gotten pretty ripe and pretty rank, and we know that we probably should have harvested this about 3 weeks ago, ideally. We can actually reduce that length of cut on that crop. So a good rule of thumb is the poorer quality that crop is going to be, the shorter the length of cut we want. And the whole idea behind that is we want those ruminal microbes to have as much surface area of that crop available as possible. So the smaller the length of cut, the smaller the particle size of that crop, the better the overall fermentation process is going to be, whether that be within a wrapped bale or within the rumen of the animal. So if we have a really super good quality ryegrass, for example, say we harvested that, it has super high sugar content. We really don't need to reduce that length of cut because we're going to have good fermentation possibility because of that high sugar content. The microbes are going to have the ability to ferment that and convert those available sugars into acids really, really well. But good rule of thumb is the poorer the quality or the drier the material, the smaller the length of cut. So that might be whenever we think about engaging those 9 knives in a poorer quality crop.
Very good information. So that's another thing to try to keep in mind is maybe you want to be out there cutting your hay. Nobody likes doing it, cutting it in the rain, but to capture more nutrients, that's more of a possibility nowadays when you can bale it wetter, right?
Sure,
So
absolutely.
you've worked on and been involved with a study, silage between the United States and France, because in some parts of the countries the climate is similar. The crop types are going to be similar as well. So can you talk to us about some of the findings that you have from that?
Yep. So previous research has shown that we want to wrap our bales within 24 hours after baling. We know that that's really going to optimize forage quality, according to this previous research that was done by Dr. Dan Undersander in Wisconsin. And one of those things is going to be making sure that that internal temperature does not exceed the 120 degree Fahrenheit mark. What we thought would be interesting to see, since we have our ProTech wrapper baler combo, and we're actually wrapping that bale right there as soon as it comes out of the chamber of the baler, how much of an improvement are we getting in terms of animal nutrition, in terms of forage quality by wrapping that bale as soon as it comes out of the chamber before it even hits the ground, versus waiting until that 24-hour time period, or that 24-hour mark after baling. So what we looked at in southeast Pennsylvania, and then we duplicated the study in Beauvais, France. So we're still getting a little bit of that ideal silage weather, where we may not have perfect dry down conditions for dry hay. So we really have good conditions for the potential for good baleage or for good round bale silage. And so we looked at waiting or rather wrapping at the 0 hour mark, which is the bale as soon as it comes out of the chamber as the Protec was intended to be used. And then we waited 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours. And in France, they even went and did a 48-hour treatment where they waited 2 full days after that bale was baled before they wrapped it. And so we wrapped that bale 2 hours after it was baled, 4 hours, 8 hours, 24, and then in France, 48 hours. And what we really found was a strong division in the 4-hour time mark between the 4-hour and the 8-hour in France, and between the 8-hour and 24-hour here in North America. So essentially, if we're just taking the shorter of those two, and we're talking about a sharp reduction in forage quality between the 4 hour and the 8 hour mark, what that's telling you is you have 4 hours to get that bale off of the field to the storage location, wrapped and sitting there after baling. If we're talking about labor and time management, that's a lot of work to do within a 4 hour time period. If we're talking about baling, moving bales, hauling those bales to the storage location, and then if we're using a standalone individual wrapper, not an inline wrapper, but a standalone wrapper, that can be anywhere from 2.5 to 3 minutes per bale if we're getting the optimal amount of wraps on it. And so just by using this Protec, we're ensuring that we're getting that oxygen excluded as quickly as possible, and we're optimizing those available nutrients. We saw an increase in digestibility at that 0 hour mark. We saw an increase in available crude protein, which is showing that that bale did not have the opportunity to heat up to reduce the overall available proteins like it did at those later time periods. And of course, we have a one-man operation with the Protec. We can get that forage baled up, we can get it wrapped, and we can drop it right there in the field, and then maybe have someone else come and pull it off to the side of the field. But it really, really cuts down on labor costs, and it cuts down on the anxiety of getting the bale hauled off and wrapped and trying to get it within that 4 hour time period, for sure.
Yeah, I'm going to take that even another step further, because we do offer individual wrappers and that kind of thing, but you've got to go grab the crop and bring it over, and we can't always do that in 4 hours, right? Unless you've got somebody just following around behind you, and that makes a multi-person operation at that point.
Yep.
Multi-tractor operation and stuff. If you have a small enough field, let's just assume you're not driving half a mile on your rows and everything, you can use the ProTech Baylor almost as a accumulator. So what you do is make your first bale, moves over to the wrapper, wrap it as you're making your second bale, and hopefully you're at your headlands at that point where you can dump. You can manually control the dump operation, dump that first bale, put the second one in, sit there and wait the 38, 45 seconds while that one wraps, dump that one. So you've got two bales on your headlands, go the other way, and you dump the other ones on the headlands too. So if you can work out your field operations, you can use it like an accumulator, and therefore you don't have to maybe get it off immediately, so you're not retarding the regrowth of your other crop, but you don't have to have another person with you at that particular moment to get it out of the field. So that's another good way of looking at it. And there's 1,000 other possibilities here. You're looking at fuel savings. Granted, you have to have a bigger tractor to run a ProTech Baylor versus a normal silage baler, but you're not running two tractors, a tractor to wrap and a tractor or even if you have an inline wrapper, it still has an engine on it that's going to have to run right there as well. So you've got fuel there, quality of life, wear and tear on the machines, and that kind of thing. Also, look at the agronomic benefits of what I just mentioned. Dropping it at the headlands, you're not having to run back across and increase the compaction of your field and so forth. So there's another thing, of course, to think about there, the labor savings and everything else. Well, I think that is it for silage baling today, unless you had any more stuff to talk about today, Jessica.
No, I think that we covered it. Yeah, but I just think that it's important to reiterate. You mentioned at the very beginning of this episode the sticker shock, but whenever you really take into account, it's hard in today's day and age to justify extra fuel. And sometimes it can be difficult to get a few extra people out in that field to haul bales around, to have somebody standing at the wrapper, wrapping bales. So whenever you take into account all of these benefits that we just outlined, the Protec is really, really an excellent answer for an operation that could be struggling with finding labor or with just finding sufficient time. Time is a very, very valuable resource for us. And this ProTech Baylor really, really helps with that time management and just an improvement in overall quality of life for our farmers.
Yep.
Well, thanks for joining us today for the second part of our series on round balers. If you missed the last episode, be sure to go back and check that out. Next episode, we're going to be talking about raking hay. That will include rake types, timing of raking, and all that good stuff. Thanks for joining us today, guys.